everyone, welcome to the July 2017 Friday Flashback review from the CC Network. I'm Fred, your ever-reliable host as always, and we return to the Big Four series fittingly as summer is starting to heat up, and we can cool down or shriek in horror at what is arguably the most uncomfortable pay-per-view poster that this company has ever done. Hey, nothing sells a pay-per-view like a mostly naked woman, right? It's the 2003 SummerSlam that we'll be reviewing today. Now, following WrestleMania 19, both shows consolidated themselves with brand-exclusive pay-per-views coming to fruition after Judgment Day, with contrasting results, with Bad Blood 2003 already being reviewed by this channel, which you can check out in the playlist below in the description. Now, Triple H's dominance was crippling Raw despite a surging Goldberg, while Brock vs. Angle reignited following the latter's return from neck surgery. Stone Cold was now the co-GM of Raw, and it hadn't really done too much, while the US title was resurrected and now entrenched into the SmackDown mid-card following Vengeance, much like the IC title had done following Judgment Day on Raw, making those mid-cards actually have validation and something to go for. Not just that, but a clear split of the rosters was markedly apparent, having noted already from 2002, but when you look at the fact that Raw's matches and their build-ups were filled with over-the-top drama and inflammatory statements, while SmackDown just focused on wrestling, really. Of course, though, Raw got more matches on this card because they're the main brand, but if you look at the fact that Mysterio vs. Moore for the Cruiserweight title was the dark match and Zach Gowen vs. Matt Hardy never took place, SmackDown could have looked better. But unfortunately, Raw had to look strong, right? God damn, they couldn't cut SmackDown any breaks even if they tried. Anyway, this SummerSlam on paper had a good enough balance of quantity and quality, and definitely enough genre diversity for itself to create a decent show. Could they do it, or have this just be a hot mess? Much like you were when you ended up looking at Sable in this poster, because seriously, some of you, I'm betting, have done some despicable things to that poster. I don't want to think about that anymore. Let's just get on with the technicalities, shall we? WWE's SummerSlam 2003 took place on 24th of August 2003 at the American West Arena in Phoenix, Arizona, with 16,113 fans coming out to see if this event could match the heat of the Sonoran Desert. Now, this event marked the WWE's first pay-per-view offering from a venue that had hosted numerous Raw and SmackDown shows, as well as a few Nitros since it first opened in 1995, but had been a WWE stronghold since the Attitude Era, and would later go on to host Judgment Day 2006, Cyber Sunday 2008, Money in the Bank 2012, and the 2013 Rumble, alongside its most recent pay-per-view event, Elimination Chamber 2017. So yeah, this is the now Talking Stick Resort Arena, and it was its pay-per-view genesis. I feel I've come full circle now, having reviewed Elimination Chamber earlier this year. Pretty damn awesome. Now, Saint Anger by Metallica served as the theme song, but not on the network version, obviously, and it's fitting, though, as a song, considering all the hatred from these rivalries on this card. And not just to mention this, but before I go into everything, I have to highlight the usual in-depth 3-star plus match rule has changed, going from 2 per video to 1 per video. Whether this shortens things, I have absolutely no idea, but it'll be interesting to see which match I give a special attention to, as it will be interesting every single time. Now, let's crack on with this thing, as the heat of the summer sun is really starting to get to me in this recording room. We kick things off with the Raw World Tag Team Championship match as the incumbent champions La Resistance took on the Dudley Boyz. Now, following their shock title win back at Bad Blood, again, if you want to hear that review, it's in the playlist down in the description box below. Grenier and Dupree were in quite a jovial mood, buoyed as they defeated the Hurricane and Sergeant Slaughter in Madison Square Garden a week later, as well as defeating Hurricane and Spike Dudley the week after that. They were building some nice momentum, but they were building a solid reputation, but it was about to come crashing down as they sang the French national anthem in honor of Bastille Day on the July 14th edition of Raw, which they did, only to be interrupted not long after by the Dudley Boyz, who stated their song sucks, and as they were in America, they, along with the fans, should sing American's national anthem instead, which, to be honest, as a foreigner, I still don't know which patriotism-based song is the national anthem. Seriously, because they sing like 3 different ones each time we go to an event. Anyway, La Resistance 2 weeks later defended their titles against Cade and Jindrak, who defeated them in a non-title match on Sunday Night Heat the week before. The Dudleys came to interfere only for the referees to remove them from the bout, as the Frenchmen then won the match, which followed by them pummeling their opponents, only for the Dudleys to make the save, only for them to be beaten down with flagpoles to the head, which will hurt. Now, the next week, Bubba Ray Dudley faced Dupree, with Grenier accidentally closing clotheslining Dupree, allowing for Bubba to pick up the win after Dupree busted open, of course, by that flagpole, with Devon being the one to do that. The next week, both teams faced off in a non-title contest, only for Dupree to exact revenge, using the Dudley Boyz' own US flags against them and draping the flag over their bodies symbolically. Now, the following week, La Resistance mourned the death of the Dudleys at their hands, and at SummerSlam, they would bury them as they taunted a US serviceman at ringside. Now, the Dudleys chased them off, gave the serviceman a chance to celebrate and lap up the applause from the crowd, only for that serviceman, who we would later know to be called as Rob Conway, blindsided them with the flagpole as Grenier and Dupree again draped the US flags over their bodies. The question, of course, would be, could they do it on the night? The wily Frenchmen, though, managed to successfully defend their titles on the night of SummerSlam, following interference again from Rob Conway, this time in an official capacity, in a paltry 7 minutes and 49 seconds. Now, this match was pretty bland, as you would expect from a La Resistance match if their bad blood bout with Van Dam and Kane was anything to go by. What made this match go up in my favour, though, as you can see on the rating factors on the screen, the Dudley Boyz' energy and a feverish Phoenix crowd managed to do the trick. They brought this match alive and made it feel bigger than any bog standard tag team match would be otherwise. Then again, when you take the high energy pace and crowd away, it really isn't much to shout about, and the swerve having Rob Conway interfere and cost the challengers alongside the aggressive physicality of Bubba Ray and Devon's sublime babyface imperial psychology really helped elevate an otherwise unremarkable match to decent levels of critical analysis. Overall, though, it just was nothing really special. They were waiting, putting through that triple threat 6-person tables match in Unforgiven. They needed something to ply it over, and the fans were not too happy with that. But I, looking at this match, felt it to be quite exciting and quite interesting, despite how underwhelming it would have looked on paper otherwise. Given the state of affairs following the Iraq War and the fact that La Resistance were heat magnets, logically the crowd would have made this fun either way, whoever was facing them. But when I look at the score, I'm giving it 1 3/4 stars. It was actually quite enjoyable for a tag match that going in I thought would be very boring and underwhelming. But hey, when it has those damn Dudleys involved, you know it is somewhat good. Then again, looking back at their Royal Rumble match only a few months earlier, I could not say the same. Again, you can check that review in the description playlist as well. I've got to stop shilling that. Let's get on with the next match, which happens to be SmackDown's first offering of the night in a titanic battle as Undertaker took on the A-Train. Now, as you may have recalled, if you don't, here's a nice refresher, that A-Train lost to Undertaker at WrestleMania 19, eating the pinfall loss in the handicap match. But he didn't do too much afterwards, often assisting Big Show wherever possible. But more importantly, it helped Vince McMahon, as he was seen as a personal hired gun, costing Stephanie her match against Sable at Vengeance. Undertaker, fresh off a match against John Cena at that same pay-per-view, thought that Vince's behaviour was disgusting. Logically, I would too, and that if he was in the McMahon family, he'd have beaten the patriarch to a bloody pulp, because he doesn't mess around. However, John Cena, he didn't want to mess around either. Of course, he lost Taker the night or two after, and wanted a rematch with Big Evil and got it granted. However, Taker re-aggravated a rib injury that he suffered at the event off a superplex. A-Train then ran in and cost Taker the match, reminding the dead man that their beef, which had lasted since, I believe, February time or January, wasn't over. Mad, right, when you think about it. Then Taker then faced off against Big Show in a no DQ match, with A-Train helping his partner with a 2x4 to the injured ribs, allowing Show to win by countout. As for Stephanie, after the events of Brock Lesnar's shocking heel turn, which we'll get to later, she was put into a match against A-Train as punishment for defying her father and being a disappointment. Really? After Vengeance was one of the most successful pay-per-views of the year? Good God, the guy is delusional. But of course, she didn't support Lesnar's actions, and he took over the show, logically. All in all, she got decimated in the match, but Taker, having seen enough, ran out to make the save, but of course got injured again, which made him easy prey for Big Show and A-Train to beat him down, allowing for Vince to further humiliate his daughter by making out with Sable. Crazy when you know Brock Lesnar is now married to her. Mad, right? Now, on the final SmackDown before SummerSlam, only a few days before the scheduled clash, A-Train and Taker were on opposite sides of a tag team match with Cena and Orlando Jordan, respectively, with the heels winning thanks to the Doctor of Thugonomics using his neck chain to wear down the ribs of the American Badass one more time. Now, would Taker overcome the injury and defeat his longtime rival once and for all, or get completely and utterly buried by a star who needed the momentum? Well, you can probably see where it's going because it's Taker in 2003. He wiped A-Train aside off a chokeslam in 9 minutes and 19 seconds. Sable then accompanied A-Train to ringside. Taker lined her up for Stephanie to get revenge, but as she was about to really lay in the beats, A-Train took Vince's harlot and walked away with tail tucked between his legs, allowing Stephanie and Taker to bask in the victory. Now, this match, much like Raw's predecessor on this card, was nothing special, but unlike the tag team title match earlier, this lived up to its underwhelming billing in comparison. While fast at times, it didn't get out of first gear often enough, with momentum shifting way too much, considering Taker's injured in this thing, meaning that A-Train's aggressive and heavy moveset didn't actually feel like it was doing damage to those ribs. But I'm very happy that Albert, the former Albert I may say, managed to do so much work on those ribs because it made me get interested. As you know, psychology is my bread and butter. If I see body selling, I'm on that thing like Donkey Kong. The fact is, though, Taker didn't sell it for a good portion of the matchup, especially in latter stages, making my sense of disbelief go out the window and my enjoyment tank. Because the crowd were hot for Taker, though, ensuring this match had some venom, and his victory, followed up by the post-match scenes, were enough to make this match somewhat memorable. It was okay, but as an in-ring contest of wrestling, this just didn't cut the mustard. It could have been a little shorter if the momentum was shifting as often as it was, as it felt like a bit of a slog by the time the 9-minute mark came up. However, if it were longer and Taker sold better, this could have been ranked higher than a 1-star bout. Unfortunately, it was labelled as such here. Now, I'm still surprised that Taker was still feuding with Big Show and A-Train at this point, because Show took Taker out in October 2002 after No Mercy, with A-Train joining, as I said earlier, around February time before WrestleMania. So, the fact that they're still going at each other come August? Good God, it's just insufferable, isn't it? And the fact is, if you think prolonging The Miz versus Dean Ambrose across 2 brands and many months in 2017 is mind-numbingly boring, spare a thought for The Undertaker seemingly caught in a similar position back in 2003. It's utterly, utterly terrible when you think about it. Next up, we have the battle between 2 former owners of WCW, one in legitimate terms, the other in storyline. Shane McMahon taking on Raw General Manager Eric Bischoff. Now, there is a lot to get through here on the storyline front because it kind of intertwines between another feud, which we'll get to later on, but listen, there's a lot to talk about, so let's just get through it. Now, following his humiliating defeat at the hands of Austin in the Redneck Triathlon, which was an abomination of all things, Bischoff wanted to re-establish his position as Raw GM by asserting his authority, firstly by getting revenge on Mae Young for that pie-eating contest. Good, I don't want to think about that again. And then by setting up this whole Kane unmasking scenario, which we'll get to later, Bischoff asserted pressure onto a mentally unbalanced Kane, all in the name of TV ratings, causing even more problems for himself and others, again, which we'll get to later. Following one of those issues, though, Bischoff had seen enough and wanted to use it as leverage to fire Stone Cold Steve Austin for good, only for Linda McMahon to give both of the GMs the night off due to their handling of that Kane situation instead of what Bischoff wanted, all the while as Austin was punished further by a non-contact clause, meaning he couldn't go out there and kick the shit out of anybody because he's the Texas Rattlesnake. Now, however, thanks to her decision, she ended up being the only authority figure present to stop Kane going nuts and stand up to him, meaning she got tombstoned as a result, leading to Vince McMahon coming out the next week wanting vengeance against the man who brought his wife into danger, who of course was now under house arrest following the JR Fire incident. Again, we'll get to that later as well. Only to want to side with the monster because Vince had just turned heel around that period, of course. Austin doesn't really defuse the situation because he actually can't due to his known provocation clause, and yeah, Vince now stated all hell would break loose by the night's end. And he was right because Shane McMahon shocked the world and appeared on WWE television for the first time since WrestleMania 19, but in an actual on-air capacity, since probably the end of the Invasion storyline, which is quite a long time ago. He took out Kane, with Vince trying to restrain his son, only to send Kane off the stage through a table. The following week, Bischoff proclaimed that if Linda hadn't given him the night off, all of this could have been avoided, ordering Shane to be removed from the building by security, per orders of his father, weirdly. Now, before that could be done, Austin made a no-holds-barred match between the young McMahon and Bischoff. Shane, in a desperate attempt to get at Kane, accidentally releases him from a security detail, leading Shane to be tombstoned on the steel steps, allowing for Bischoff to score the shock and very cheap win. But his happiness didn't last long the following week, as JR returned following the fire incident, threatening to sue his ass off the horrific ordeal he suffered at Kane's hands, with Austin noting the charges would be dropped if Bischoff faces an opponent of JR's choosing, with the Coxhaw GM just signing the contract. Despite being a TV executive, you'd think he'd read all of the fine print. Well, he didn't do that. Oh yeah, he didn't, believing he thought it would be Shane, so therefore he didn't need to read it. But of course, JR picked Kane instead on that very same night. But unfortunately, the match was a bit of a farce, as Kane decided not to partake and do what he wants, allowing Bischoff to get the win by count-out. He was elated at not being annihilated by the monster. Unfortunately, Austin highlighted to him, oh, good God, he didn't get one over on him at all, as the Texas Rattlesnake informed him that the winner of that match would be the one to face Shane McMahon at SummerSlam. And on the final Raw before the show, Shane said there wouldn't even be a match, as they would beat Bischoff beyond any recognition on that same night. However, Bischoff had a hunch Shane would be after him, and went to the McMahon house in Stamford, Connecticut to confront Linda, saying that he's irritated still that WCW, a company that he helped build up, was just handed to Shane on a silver platter. Quite fantastic. And for that, he will break Shane's legs and cause him to be left in a bloody pulp. Good God, before telling the injured McMahon matriarch to enjoy the massive kiss that he locked on, all while Shane watched from Grand Rapids, Michigan, in disgust, stealing a car and presumably going after Bischoff to give him the hiding of his life. Which you would think that this match would have entailed. The thing is, though, I'm wondering, would this match have as much going on as the bad blood that the build-up would have let in? Well, not too much, actually. Shane defeated Bischoff off an elbow drop through the table, following a Jonathan Coachman heel turn, good God almighty, with the match being changed to a no DQ match by Bischoff beforehand without telling anybody. Austin, of course, got provoked and kicked Bischoff's ass, and it all went down as you would have expected after 10 minutes and 36 seconds. Now, this was more of an angle than an actual match, to be frank, but despite that, there were little sprinkles that made it worth the time. Much like Raw's opener, as I repeat once again, the psychology and crowd helped drag this meaningless match into positive equity. Now, you can thank Coach's heel turn, Stone Cold's ass whooping, and Phoenix wanting both of the heels to be embarrassed for it. However, while they make this entertaining when you switch your mind off, critically, the pace was sluggish, disjointed, and slow as all hell, and the move variety was scarce, although the finish of an elbow drop through the table to Bischoff was lovely. If you take away the story and the crowd, you'd be looking at a quarter of a star, or even a zero-worthy contest. But as you can see, the ratings look quite nice for a match that offered up so very little, and could have happened on Raw given notice. It's a 3/4 of a star match. Now, it's still poor, as you would expect from two non-wrestlers, but with enough energy and story to get away with it. I bet many of you didn't see this rating coming at all. Now, following that elongated palaver, we finally get to SmackDown's first title match on this card, a fatal four-way for the United States Championship, which on paper looks amazing, as it has Eddie Guerrero defending against Chris Benoit, Rhino, and Tajiri. You know it's good with all four of those guys in there, right? Now, thanks to interference from Rhino, Eddie defeated Benoit in the tournament finals at Vengeance to become the first ever US champion under WWE's banner, officially. Not a WCW one, of course, but the belts still share lineage for some reason. Now, Rhino explained that he turned on Benoit because he wasn't being treated with enough respect as his tag partner following Edge's injury back in February, but with Benoit calling the man beast out so he could take a beating like a man, only for the ECW original to take leave instead. Guerrero Guerrero, though, wasn't safe from tag team turmoil either, as his former champion-winning partner Tajiri, who of course replaced Chavo Guerrero at Judgment Day to win the belts with Latino Heat, he ended up being turned on a few weeks by Guerrero in a quest for the new US title and vengeance. Crazy, right? And Tajiri got his own back spraying the green mist after being locked up in the boot of Latino Heat's lowrider, leading to an unfair advantage for the Japanese going into Eddie's first title defense, of course. But that green mist would be Tajiri's downfall as he sprayed it in the referee's face, and a frog splash later allowed for Eddie to end up getting the victory and his first title defense. Now, the following week, Guerrero and Benoit faced each other. However, Tajiri and Rhino interfered, attacking their respective rivals, leading to a no DQ tag title match being made, as Benoit and Tajiri won, as Guerrero tapped the crippler crossface. Good God. And the following week, Tajiri and Rhino faced off, while Benoit and Guerrero were at ringside, which somehow remained civil, despite the animosity, as the Fatal 4-Way was announced on a TV advertisement rather than an official statement. Nuts, right? Now, on the final SmackDown, Tajiri and Benoit faced off against Guerrero and Rhino again, ending in DQ as Eddie decked Benoit with the belt, with Rhino and Tajiri getting the same fate as the champion looked to consolidate his success and gain the upper hand going into SummerSlam. Now, surprisingly, this is the 3-star plus in-depth match that I'll be looking at today. Why? Because I analysed Angle vs Lesnar at WrestleMania, so treading similar ground again is a bad idea for repetition's sake. So let's see in depth what SmackDown's mid-card at the time could do on such a big stage like this. Right as Mike Sparks lifts up the title to signal the contest starting, Eddie jumps right out of the ring and stays there as Benoit, Rhino and Tajiri go at it. Smart move by the champion, if I dare say so myself, as Rhino takes out the man he's screwed out of the title but is locked in a crossface. Eddie then breaks the hold but then leaves the ring just as fast, right as Tajiri takes Rhino out before turning to Benoit with a knee to the face for 2, before Eddie again came in, broke it and ran. Rhino takes down Tajiri with a shoulder block covering again, but Eddie broke it, this time staying in, but all 3 men stood up and got revenge, wailing a few punches on the champion. Tajiri covered for a 2 count, but it wasn't successful. Rhino takes Eddie down with a front power slam for 2, which Benoit breaks up as he lines for a snap suplex for 2, before giving Tajiri a once-over with a backdrop. Eddie clears Rhino out of the ring with Benoit following, keeping Tajiri in his sights with chops to the chest. Whipped of course, with Tajiri dodging it and hitting a monkey flip and a tilt-a-whirl for 2, as Rhino breaks it up this time. Benoit storms through and saves Eddie from a beating, but is slammed right into the turnbuckle back first, with Eddie taking him out before Rhino gets him up and hits a superplex for 2 as Tajiri breaks it up. It's mad speed and near falls aplenty early on here, as the breath nearly got taken out of my voice, with Tajiri nearly getting a win off a kick to Rhino's chest, followed by a springboard elbow to Benoit for 2, as Eddie saved his title before being slammed by Rhino for 2 as well. Eddie rebounds off a whip with the head scissors before focusing on Benoit, jumping up for a tornado DDT cover, but the rabid Wolverine somehow managed to kick out. Eddie then hits out of the way with Rhino and Benoit colliding, with Eddie taking the Man Beast out, with Tajiri now kicking Latino Heat square in the face, but is overwhelmed and locked into the lasso from El Paso. The Japanese buzzsaw writhes in pain, but it gets worse overall as Benoit jumps in and locks the crippler crossface on Rhino as well. Now, Mike Sparks doesn't know what the hell he's doing here. What's he going to do? Who's he going to check on? Who's going to tap out? It's mental. But of course, Tajiri grabs the ropes, releasing one hold, allowing for Eddie to break up the other, but then he's locked into a crippler crossface of his own as the crowd goes ballistic, only for Tajiri and Rhino to break it up, stomping Benoit's head in the process to do it. Now Tajiri misses a Hurricane Rana attempt and he's whipped and nailed with an amazing double A spinebuster by Rhino, but unluckily for the Man Beast, he couldn't get the free count as he's drop kicked out by Benoit. The pace is just so relentless here as Benoit nails Tajiri with 2 German suplexes, hurling Eddie Guerrero off a body backdrop, only allowing for Tajiri to counter and hit a bridging German suplex of his own for 2 as the crowd popped hard for the skill and also for the idea that Tajiri could possibly win this thing. Benoit misses a shoulder thrust and is locked in a bridging German suplex. I've already highlighted that already. Sorry, a tarantula. That's actually worse as Eddie grabs his title at ringside but is nailed with a gore in the ring, of course knocking his challenger out with a belt to the skull. He goes up for the frog splash but Tajiri knocks him down, with the Japanese going up only to be tied in a tree of woe, which Benoit tramples on to only hit a swan dive headbutt to Rhino for 2 as Tajiri scrambled free to break the hold. Benoit goes for a powerbomb, but Tajiri Hurricane Rana's himself and his opponent out of the ring, allowing for Eddie to climb up, hit the frog splash on the prone man-beast to get the 3 and retain the title in a match that lasted nearly as long as Raw's non-wrestler war earlier at 10 minutes and 50 seconds. Well, here's something that really invigorated this pay-per-view and brought it to life quickly. A fast and furious and frantic fatal 4-way that didn't feel like a collection of individual one-on-one matches pushed together like many multi-man matches are, as all 4 men were often in the ring at the same time, ensuring madness as near falls came out of almost every move that was hit, bringing out immense drama when it seemed like Eddie wouldn't walk out with the belt. Now, having 2 tough bruisers and 2 high flyers ensured the chemistry between all 4 men felt fresh with different combinations, while many of them not lasting long, keeping the unpredictability on its toes as all of these men fought really hard, looked credible, and put it all on the line as a chance to succeed came for them, telling a great physical story offer very little in the process, especially with Eddie dodging everybody in the early going before realising, oh good god, I'm going to actually have to get in here and fight them. Funny as it all may have been. And while many would have praised this match for being fast as all hell, which I have done to a degree, I felt there was way too much pace in this match though. And while many would consider that a positive, to have so many near falls nearly killed the spectacle and made this bout feel like it was rushed for time, and by not breaking 15 minutes, it's easy to see why there. The lack of crazy moves didn't help, although seeing Rhino hit a superplex, something I don't ever really see from him in WWE, was nice to see, and the double submissions were lovely too, to cap off a decent showing for a match that showcased intensity and in-ring greatness of SmackDown in a very good light. Now, all the while keeping the crowd involved and interested despite its blistering pace and ever-shifting offense. I gotta say, it was a little too in your face at times and was quite overwhelming, limited by its time, meaning finer points of story and pace were not incorporated well, but I've gotta say this, it was still very much enjoyable and very fun to watch. A 3-star rating is what I gave here. Not too shabby from a match that I barely remembered when I first watched this event, when I originally got the DVD many years later after its airing. It seems like my taste in wrestling really has evolved from when I was younger. This kind of physical, amazing athletic contest is what I like nowadays, rather than spot fests, although I'm got a penchant for those still. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, SmackDown had 1 title match in the bag, and the next one came up straight afterwards. The main event from the blue brand for the WWE Championship. The rematch, the much anticipated rematch from WrestleMania 19, as Kurt Angle, once again with the championship over his shoulder, defended against Brock Lesnar. Now, as noted earlier in the intro, Kurt Angle took some time off from WWE following WrestleMania 19's slobber knocker of a main event as he underwent neck surgery, but he came back far sooner than anyone thought and just as quickly reclaimed his place as WWE Champion in the process by defeating Brock Lesnar and The Big Show at Vengeance in a triple threat to win the title for a 4th time. Angle, however, had his festivities ruined by one Vince McMahon, who claimed that Angle begged not to have a rematch with Lesnar scheduled, despite the Olympian's earnest declaration he'd be more than happy to have it, claiming that Lesnar would have to earn the title shot, as Angle would more than likely stab Lesnar in the back, given their past history, because of course, Kurt Angle was a heel back at WrestleMania. Logically, Vince is kind of right noting that. And of course, Lesnar, being pissed at McMahon's decision, wanted to take the boss on himself for daring to think badly of Kurt Angle, his friend. But Vince McMahon made the match, because he's got giant grapefruits. But he made it a cage match, with the small little caveat that Angle had to be the special guest referee. Then again, they did just win a match against A-Train and Big Show, but no, that's not important, ladies and gentlemen. The cage match is what matters. Now, the following week, Lesnar was attacked backstage, with the finger being pointed at Kurt Angle, because he would, of course, want to take out his nearest challenger despite being best friends, right? Lesnar, though, decided to go ahead with it and went into the match with a concussion, which came out as he tried to F5 Vince, but of course couldn't do it. Angle didn't count with a pin because he was concerned for his friend's health. Now Vince, being a douchebag, got pissed off with this, allowing for Angle to turn on his boss, attack him with the ankle lock, But as you know, Lesnar turned heel on this night, and this was where it all happened, with Lesnar kipping up, revealing that he had sided with the devil himself, as they beat Angle to a bloody mess inside the cage. And thanks to this new alliance, the SummerSlam title bout was confirmed, with Stephanie McMahon lambasting her father for this unbelievable portrayal and the warping of her prized draw, setting the stones in place for what would lead up to No Mercy 2 months later, as she was put into the already noted match with A-Train, while Lesnar got a match against a defiant Spanky, who predictably got absolutely annihilated. Even though we got the DQ win though, so that's good for Spanky, right? Now, Angle returned on the final SmackDown before the pay-per-view, telling McMahon that he didn't need an elaborate plan to defeat Brock Lesnar, and that he could do it on his own on Sunday by kicking his ass in the ring. But for now, he'd either fight both of them or individually, to which Vince responded that he would fire Angle right there and then if he goes anywhere near Lesnar, as he could do what he wants as chairman, logically undermining the authority of his daughter, who of course is the GM. Now, Big Show, fresh off helping A-Train take out Undertaker and assisting on last week's show, he brawled with Angle, resulting in a Falls Count Anywhere street fight between them being announced, and in said brawl, Angle won it, putting Big Show through a table in a hard-fought contest. But on the other hand, Lesnar's warm-up fight against Zach Gowen in the One-Legged Wonder's hometown, I believe of Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, where he got infamously annihilated, led to many questions over to whether a tired Angle could best a fresh Lesnar with blood on his hands 3 days later. Now, only the match at hand would tell, but the answer is yes, Angle could do it. He made Lesnar tap out to the ankle lock after 21 minutes and 17 seconds, after which he then ended up angle slamming Vince McMahon through a steel chair, and all is well in the world, right? Not if you looked at SmackDown following this show, obviously, because things leading up to Survivor Series and No Mercy in particular were going to get a lot worse for all concerned. Now, this is just as good as you would expect from these two, as their chemistry, smoothness, in movement and in-ring ability just made this as exciting as their prior WrestleMania match, with the combination of hard-hitting, agile and crisp wrestling, played to a match where, unlike Angle at Mania, it was Lesnar on the defensive, as Angle targeted those previously injured ribs that obviously caused issues at WrestleMania, lovely, and the newly injured shoulder and soon ankle with every single move, as Lesnar sold beautifully, with his resilience and endurance coming through to play, with both men playing through to a crowd that respected them. But much like Mania, stayed too quiet in the early going. That's just my opinion. Now, there were some nice moves too, including a grapevine sleeper hold with the legs, which is something you do not see every day, while the inclusion of a cheerleader in Vince McMahon made this have more storyline implication. It made its end quite tense, even with Angle winning clean here. Overall, this match just went as long as their WrestleMania bout, but to me, was a little slow in places, and overall for me, not long enough. I know a few weeks later they have their classic Iron Man match, which would justify only giving a taster here, but I would have liked more, and I also would have liked McMahon's contribution to have meant more too, and have Angle not have dominated as much as he did, because it didn't help things. And if it were longer, it would have been better. But despite its faults, especially knowing how this match needed blood as well, considering how aggressive the build-up was, it was on par with their WrestleMania match in showcasing these two athletes in their prime, but felt a bit too samey in places to really go any further. But that isn't really a bad thing, as these two wrestling is something I can watch any time of the day, any day of the week. I feel that the Iron Man match between them tipped the qualities and chemistry over the edge, which is, of course, meant this match was just a warm-up for it. But I'm telling you, for a warm-up for a bigger match only a month down the line, this was a damn good one. It was the best match on the night by a country mile. It was a 4-star match. Exactly the same as their Mania bout, because for me, I feel they are one in the same. But they were both equally as enjoyable as one another, which is always important to insist on. I just needed a little more on the move, time and story front to really be the standout match that this night needed. Then again, it did manage to reach 4 stars, so even though it didn't achieve what I or many would have wanted, it still proved to be great. Is there anything these guys couldn't do, is all I will say. And now, the last 2 matches are Raw's responsibility. Let's see if the red brand that had 2 months of build going into this show could give us 2 matches to end the night on that'll make us all feel happy. I will swear this to you now, though, they don't even come close to this. So SmackDown, pat yourself on the back. You did a good job here. And speaking of which, we reached the first of those 2 matches as 2 former tag team partners collide, with Rob Van Dam taking on a recently unmasked Kane. Now, I noted earlier on the Bischoff and Shane McMahon stuff was going to have a lot of build-up notes because there was a lot going on in 2 months to build it all up. The thing is, though, this one, the notes for it go off the page I'm looking at here. It's ridiculous. With 2 months of build, they had to get this right, and they had so much going on that from the end of Bad Blood through till Vengeance's conclusion in late July, Kane and everything that surrounded him took up every single bit of main event attention. So let's get right into this absolutely colossal build-up. There is a lot here to look at. Now, following the losing of the World Tag Team titles to La Resistance at Bad Blood, both men were at odds with each other as they blamed each other for losing. With Kane stating that he ever lost again, they would both go their separate ways. Putting aside their differences, though, they had their rematch less than 24 hours later on Raw, once again losing to the cunning Frenchman, with Kane destroying everything in sight out of aggression. Triple H, though, of course, who recently just retained his title against Kevin Nash inside Hell in a frickin' cell, came out and offered the Big Red Machine a chance to join Evolution and become the monster that they needed to run it. Of course, Batista was injured back before WrestleMania, so they kinda needed it. But Stone Cold Steve Austin, who had been trying to motivate Kane and RVD for weeks, reasoned with him, saying that the only reason he wants Kane to be in the stable is to reduce the threat to his title, offering Kane a chance to take the belt from him in Madison Square Garden the next week. But Eric Bischoff, as I already highlighted, wanted to re-establish himself, said as a little bit of a stipulation here, with a new spanner in the works, that the match ended up happening that if Kane lost, he would have to unmask in front of the world. And as we know, Kane did lose thanks to Orton and Flair's help, leading to Kane's eventual yet underwhelming unmasking, followed with a chokeslam to RVD, even after he'd helped to fend off Evolution with him just moments earlier, trying to basically tell him it's an okay thing, remove the mask, no one's going to say anything to you, and you know where all that goes. Now, Bischoff apologised for making Kane unmasked the next week, because Kane, being psychologically disturbed as he is, was not in a good mood, and he pinned the blame on Van Dam to cover his own skin, logically, and he tries to make up for it by giving Kane another shot at the title, but when the now disgruntled Big Red Machine declined it, Van Dam is given the shot instead, and against what Kane wants, is told that if he doesn't go out there and face the people without his mask on, he'd be fired. Van Dam tried to talk some sense into his former partner, but it doesn't work, as Kane states his hatred for not just the fans, but for Van Dam himself after what transpired last week. Van Dam, angry at what Bischoff's desperate ratings grab had done to his friend, tried to get Bischoff off his power-hungry pedestal, but warned Mr. Monday Night that if Kane lost his job, it would be on his head, and that his aggression would be better served beating Triple H up instead. Lovely. The title match went ahead with Van Dam being attacked by Flair, leading to the match being restarted as a no DQ match by Bischoff, with Triple H getting the win off a belt shot and a DDT on the ramp to keep the title around his waist. But Evolution, their celebrations didn't last very long as an angry Kane came out, pyro and all, and Flair got scared out of his own boots, looking to chokeslam RVD right there and then. But he changed his mind, going after Bischoff instead, chokeslamming him off the stage in very violent fashion indeed. Kane continued a violent spree attacking Raw superstars left and right before sitting down with Austin and asking the GM to tender his resignation. Austin, however, considered it pathetic, and after spending weeks trying to get Kane to be that monster again, he wants the tortured soul to unleash his anger in the ring, which he does, doing so to Austin himself after he took the Texas Rattlesnake laughing at Bischoff's chokeslam as an insult to Kane himself, leading to a devastating chokeslam for the other half of Raw's dysfunctional authority. The following week, Van Dam wanted Kane in a match and had it penciled in for next week, while the Big Red Machine had a sit-down interview with JR to try and sort out his issues, while it was unveiled that the story of Kane's traumatic childhood and his scars all came through, which is actually quite fantastic if you watch this back. It also led to Kane bad-mouthing all those who had tried to help him, with it ending in the beloved announcer, as we already highlighted, being set on fire in a fit of rage. Although you have to question why there was a can of gas, petroleum, next to Kane on the table. I still don't understand that years later, and it's really weird, of course. Anyway, he did that while JR was screaming as Austin and the rest of the world looked on in shock. Now, Kane was accompanied with a police escort the next week as he brawled with Van Dam in the aisleway, taking the referee out in the process. He was about to chokeslam Van Dam off the stage, only for the officials to save Van Dam from any damage. However, that only led to Linda McMahon being pile-driven, as we already know. Now, while Van Dam retained normal business wrestling over the next 2 weeks, the match between them was signed by Vince McMahon, as Kane started his feud with Shane following this event, as we noted from earlier, with the already highlighted Bischoff-Kane match ending in a farce, as Kane decided he wanted to do whatever he wanted, not what the fans wanted, as he decided to let Bischoff off, only for Van Dam to take his shot and take Kane out, only to eat a steel chair off a frog splash for his troubles. Now, on the final Raw before SummerSlam, Van Dam fought Christian in a match for the Intercontinental Championship, which I must remind you wasn't even on the card here, only for Kane to assault him. Van Dam fought back valiantly but ate a chair to the head off a suicide dive. He was then carried back to the backstage area, tied up, and then had gas poured all over his head and body as Kane threatened to light it, but then went against it, knowing that the fans would want to see a murder on television, and he didn't want to make them feel happy. And he walked away, leaving many to question, after all that had happened here, after all the intensity, after all the craziness, and of course the violence, what would happen at SummerSlam between these two when you've got such an unhinged monster on the loose? Well, Howard Finkel announced before the bell that this match got changed into a no-holds-barred match. I would have loved that in the build-up. That would have been really nice to hear, ladies and gentlemen. Nonetheless, Kane destroyed a valiant and determined Rob Van Dam off a tombstone piledriver after a very slow 12 minutes and 49 seconds of action. Well, as you could tell, this build and feud was just brimming, ready to explode, and you'd think, after all that had happened, that a no-holds-barred match in this stipulation would have ended in quite a quick and violent squash of RVD, establishing Kane as a threat going forward, right? But honestly, I would have wanted that. I would have loved that instead of the sluggish and tawdry weapons match that we got that did more for Mr. Monday Night than it did for the Big Red Machine. Looking to keep the former strong going into Unforgiven a month later, they had to ensure he had a good showing, and by shifting momentum quickly and using all of his speed and ring awareness to do it, all while Kane slowly but surely picked him apart, with the master of the 5-star frog splash having to solely utilise weapons to get the job done, while Kane's strength and power mostly did the rest. The story, while solid, was lacking in selling and a decent pace, didn't get faster as it went on, with the cumbersome feel of it thanks to many breaks in progression to suck in the dread and atmosphere. But it just sucked all the life out of the match overall as a whole. Considering how boring a violent match can be if it feels half-assed as this one did, it went on for too long, and what they were trying to do in this match warranted more length to ensure it was done right, but I would have preferred if Rob Van Dam got annihilated, as I'm expecting many would have wanted it in Phoenix, as the slow build to its finish really just neutered the crowd and turned a hot angle that dominated Raw for most of the last 2.5 months, making it stumble on its first pay-per-view outing. It was just not good. It wasn't at all, and it just had enough to warrant a 1.25 star rating, but nothing more, ladies and gentlemen. The thing is, I wish this could have been done better and much more violent to make me feel really uncomfortable about Kane's character and just how unhinged and unpredictable and crazy and aggressive it was. But we didn't get that, but at least it ended with a tombstone on the steps to fit with the program, so that's something, right? Anyway, we need to head on to the main event, Raw's Elimination Chamber match for the World Heavyweight Championship, as the long-reigning incumbent Triple H took on Goldberg, Kevin Nash, Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels, and Evolution stablemate Randy Orton. Now, the build to this match was quite mad, but not in a good way. Raw had a lot to do following Bad Blood to set up SummerSlam's feuds, and logically, a lot of the roster just did stuff to keep them occupied. Chris Jericho continued his feud with Goldberg, Kevin Nash kept himself with Shawn Michaels going after Evolution, Randy Orton started his feud with Mick Foley, and of course, as we noted, Triple H got himself involved in this Kane-Rob Van Dam situation. Now, for a few weeks after Raw's first brand-exclusive pay-per-view, they seemed to have a lot of matches on the card for SummerSlam, but having to share it with SmackDown meant some of them had to be cut, or as I should say, be fused together to save all of that time from being wasted. Now, after a month of solid madness following the Kane situation as Raw's main headliner, Raw's contribution to SummerSlam started to take shape as Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, Randy Orton and Kevin Nash all started crossing over and feuding with each other, while Goldberg, fresh off flattening Stevie Richards in 45 seconds, got congratulated by Evolution for his efforts as Triple H noted that while the match was impressive, it wasn't against the world champion, leading to the proposition for a match between the two at SummerSlam, which was actually confirmed. Logically, because obviously Bischoff wouldn't turn that down. However, later that evening in a dark match between the two, the game suffered a legitimate groin muscle injury. Whether it was a tear or a strain, I honestly can't remember, leading to Bischoff wanting to ensure that the match at SummerSlam was as fair to the champion as possible, and that he got a very easy ride, as it was announced to be a no DQ match with Evolution in Triple H's corner. Now, Goldberg, having arranged a match for Ric Flair during that confrontation the week prior, got a DQ win following interference by Orton, with Triple H, Michaels, Nash and Jericho all getting involved as all hell broke loose, of course. Though Austin would end up making it much, much worse for all involved, because he thought of a novel idea to get Bischoff's idea thrown out of the window by overlapping all of these feuds together and announcing an Elimination Chamber match for the title at SummerSlam instead, undermining Bischoff's plans, not only angering the cerebral assassin immensely by not overturning it, but also losing Evolution in Bischoff's corner for the already noted no-holds-barred match against Shane McMahon, which, as we know, he didn't even need. Now, Goldberg battled with Flair, with Orton a special guest referee, only for Michaels to interfere and cost Flair the match, taking Orton out in the process with a sick-looking super kick, logically, and then Jericho fought Van Dam and last proclaiming that the jackknife that he received earlier on caused him to lose, wanting to face big sexy Kevin Nash in a hair versus hair match, which would have been great on pay-per-view on its own, which was finalised for a week later on the final Raw. And as part of the highlight reel on that show, Triple H reminded everyone that he spent 48 hours in a hospital after the last chamber match following his larynx injury without his championship. But this year, it'll be different, as he will walk out with the title, no questions asked, only to be interrupted by Goldberg, Michaels and Nash attacking everybody in sight. You can see how predictable this is, as all descended into chaos once again. Jericho subsequently won with a low blow to cut Nash's hair short as a result. From that hair versus hair stipulation, the chaos reared its head again as a one-on-one match between Orton and Goldberg saw mass interference, with Stone Cold, the special enforcer of the bout, being pulled aside by Flair, allowing for a stunner as the newly trimmed Nash, Goldberg and Michaels came through once again to clear house, only for Jericho to get the last laugh, taking Michaels out and leaving himself the only man standing in the ring as the show went off the air. Bloody hell. See, I told you that it was manic. Raw didn't really get its booking together and decided on an Elimination Chamber 3 weeks prior to a Big Four show to ensure that all these big feuds crossed over, to ensure that when it came to Unforgiven, they would actually have something to work with. It's a Big Four pay-per-view, and I still don't believe they did all this. It's frankly insane. And it all together as cleanly as you would expect, with Triple H controversially retaining the title by last eliminating Goldberg following a sledgehammer to the head in 19 minutes and 12 seconds, the shortest chamber match in history to date, and surprisingly the only one to have gone under 20 minutes. Jesus wept, and if you think that is the start of some of the problems, this match, as you could probably tell, had a lot more than you'd think, because apparently this show was running late, which resulted in rushed entrances, rushed eliminations, and timing issues that clearly hampered proceedings. To have an Elimination Chamber just pass you by quickly with not much happening, it's intriguing but also understandable to realise that no other chamber match in the match's history has ever felt as pointless. Well, except for the Intercontinental title one a few years ago. That was garbage. In fact, that's the lowest rated chamber match I've ever given, and obviously this wasn't as bad as that. But what are you going to do? At the time, they only had one to compare it with, and that one at Survivor Series 2002 was nearly a classic. Now, Raw had way too much going on to justify 2 or 3 of their feuds taking up this card. They'd have been fine for Unforgiven, but not for SummerSlam, which means sadly, they all just got shoved in here, and it didn't amount to much. It was building to Goldberg coming in and whooping ass, which he did, taking out everyone but Triple H and his former WCW sparring partner in Nash, who barely made a dent in proceedings himself. Goldberg added dynamism, he's a dinosaur, but who cares? He added dynamism and tension to the latter stages where Michaels, Jericho and Orton gave athleticism and pace and its early going, while Nash's quick elimination ensured that it wasn't hampered at all, allowing it to flow somewhat smoothly to a degree. The mini rematch between Jericho's and Michaels was nice as it opened up old wounds, while Orton failing as the insurance policy for Evolution added a touch of dread, while Triple H being knocked out by Shawn only to barely survive Goldberg really added some nice psychological venom and story implications for what we were going to see coming up at Unforgiven the next month. Now, also we had Jericho pinning Nash as well, as their feud came through too, but Nash left after this, and it wasn't anything to continue with. Overall, this match had a stable story, especially considering there wasn't a lot to say for it. And of course, the finish with the blood pouring and controversy surging, it all came together better than anyone would have thought, including me. However, the crowd, while into it, were quiet, waiting for Goldberg to enter, and he decimated everything, which made them love it, but of course they hated the finish, as you would expect, and it neutered the intensity that the first one had at Survivor Series 2002. It was just not the same. And all in all, this was a solid bout, but it felt rushed, lifeless, and meagre in comparison to its older brother, which didn't have a high hope in besting at all. And the fact is, it was okay as far as an elimination match on its own goes, but an Elimination Chamber? Bloody hell. They should be, in my opinion, a 3-star minimum, and without a rabid crowd, time to get invested, and obviously if you remove the screwy finish, we might have actually been looking at a 3-star quality match. But we're left with a painfully average 2.5-star contest. No wonder outside of the Goldberg, no one really remembers this. It's just there. It makes an impact, but a very fleeting one. It meant that this event ended on a note that many didn't like, and while I can understand that Triple H's legitimate groin injury and the needing of a main event for Unforgiven meant that Triple H had to look strong and retain here, but to have it happen so suddenly and cheaply, it just didn't do anything apart from downplaying Goldberg's momentum to where his eventual win a month later was just an inevitability rather than an uproarious and destructive success that it was meant to most likely be here had he won it if Triple H wasn't injured. I'm fine with him not winning it here. I can see why it was done, but to have it done so badly and so irritatingly at the same time, it does still leave a bad taste in my mouth as we go, leaving off that into my final thoughts for this show. I noted in the beginning of this review, which seems like an eternity ago now, that on paper this SummerSlam's card looked to have a good mixture of what pro wrestling in this time period could deliver with a lot of success. Great in-ring wrestling, coupled in with hyperbolized soap opera, and violence sprinkled over all of it. It should have been much more than we actually got here. SmackDown, for the most part, held up their end of the bargain with the two best matches of the night by a country mile, and while Raw's main event scored the minimum that I would offer any match to being considered in my good books, it got there by the skin of its teeth, while its undercard and semi-main event floundered under its own steam and a jumbled, incoherent direction, while the blue brand's lowlight was a tiny drop in the negativity pond, while the red brand ended up splashing the water everywhere, leaving us with not much to look at. I felt like this show was just too Raw heavy, and it didn't give SmackDown's bouts room to breathe, apart from the main event on their side, strangling the night in their 2 months of build in comparison to SmackDown's less than 4 weeks after Vengeance. And it showed, as this card didn't contain enough good wrestling to make me feel happy, despite the fact that nearly half the card delivered what I would consider good ratings. This SummerSlam, then, is one that is serviceable and easily watchable, but it's lacking in a lot of finesse, quality, and length to ensure that the quickest of matches just didn't go by without really making much of an impact. Or in the case of Raw's contributions, with Kane and RVD going way too long, being booked in the wrong direction and minimising its impact for what it was, the Dudley Boyz not winning soured a match that surpassed all expectations, and the Bischoff-Shane match I've already highlighted that could have been easily on Raw instead of this, putting something else there to make this night feel better and worthy of my time. All in all, this SummerSlam may have a few diamonds in the rough that put it in good stead underneath average, but there's enough poor quality in it to where it falters with theatrics aplenty. This was a pay-per-view that showed, after a stellar WrestleMania, the writing and booking for this company was all over the place. They had a few good things going for it, especially on SmackDown. The thing is, though, with a showcase like this, a Big Four pay-per-view, it just didn't have the fireworks that one would expect. It did alright considering its issues, but I wouldn't write home about it. It's fine if you can even consider it that, but nothing more. It's not the best show in the world, and overall, SummerSlam 2003 gets a below average 4 out of 10. It's disjointed in places and a little flat, but there's enough good to decent stuff in here where it's worth not ignoring it outright. However, 2003's Big Four shows now skew 2-1 in favour of negatives. So, I'm hoping in 2 months' time come September, when we review Survivor Series 2003, that show can tie it back. Of course, I reviewed that show back in 2012. Or was it 2011 I did that show? I can't remember. All I know is back then, I remember what I rated it. And I'm worried that 2003, really, after all the nostalgia that it has brought back in reviewing these shows, really on its Big Four showings, doesn't live up to all the expectations you would think it would have garnered. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is it. The July 2017 Friday Flashback of SummerSlam 2003 is done, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day to make this review part of it, and I'm sorry that it took so long to get there. The thing is though, like I've said, Raw had so much build going into some of their matches that logically it would take me that long to remind you all of what happened so you don't have to go onto the network and watch all of those episodes of Raw to do so. Because how many hours of programming time and part of your week is that going to take up? Pay-per-view takes 3, all those Raws will probably take up, 12? Maybe 24 hours? Who knows? But all I know is, this review did the job that Raw and watching it back never could. But I hope you enjoyed the show that this review was about as well, because if you didn't, you might be in the same boat as me. What did you all feel about this show? Put your opinions down in the comment section, I'd be glad to read it. And of course, if you don't want to miss out on the next WWE pay-per-view review, which will be Battleground in a week or so's time, and of course, the next Friday Flashback review, which is not announced with a date at this point, all you have to do is click the subscribe button down there. And not to mention, if you're a video game fan and you like Overwatch, we have a top 5 Overwatch heroes countdown coming at the end of this month, so all is looking pretty solid. And as SummerSlam 2003 is left out in the sun, I need to get the hell out of it because this recording studio I am in right now is a sweatbox. Good God almighty. it's time for me to bid adieu and hope that you, much like me, were not mentally scarred by looking at Sable's pay-per-view poster. I am very happy I don't have to be looking at that anymore because I would happily burn that poster if I had the chance. Oh shit, I've got it in my DVD. I better go do that now. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people listening. This has been another Friday Flashback pay-per-view review for the CC Network, and I will see you all next time.